Hello, it's 6:30 p.m. on May 29th, 2023, and I'm calling to order this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, we're all here. There are no regrets, and I would ask everyone to join Council in O Canada and the land acknowledgement. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. In 1820, Indigenous people here began welcoming settlers from all over the empire. Soon, they were helping slaves escaping from the United States to settle here too. Today, our Indigenous founding partners are still here enjoying this land with us. They fish and camp under their treaty rights. Indigenous people in their thousands also live with us as neighbors and friends. Our Indigenous white and black settlers created a community with an attractive degree of harmony and prosperity. And in 1857, Ontario gave official recognition of Oakville as a town. At Town Hall, all of these years later, we fly the flag of the Mississaugas of the Credit beside the flags of Oakville, Ontario, and Canada. We fly these flags together to acknowledge our origins. People from all over the world are attracted to the livability that we have and we've created and we are creating. We offer newcomers a warm spirit of welcome. We offer everyone our founding story so everyone knows what we are part of. We feel sorrow and distress for acts of racism and intolerance that are suffered across Canada and here at home. We want our future to be equitable and inclusive for all. The path of truth and reconciliation can unite us all. Please keep well, stay safe, and let us on Council know of any chance to be helpful to you and yours. Please let us know anytime you can help increase Oakville's harmony, prosperity, and livability. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, there are no declarations. Council, would a mover and seconder like to confirm or correct the minutes of the previous meetings as listed in the agenda? Councillor McNeice and Councillor Shi, thank you. Any objection to their motion? Madam Clerk, there being none, that motion is carried and the minutes are confirmed. We have no public presentations for this meeting, and it would now be in order. Sorry, Councillor O'Meara?
Sorry, Your Worship, and I'm sorry to do this, but I'm always cognizant of our hydro partners who are waiting and might wait till end of the night. So if there's any chance that we can move them up the agenda, if it's okay to you, I always would like to offer that up at their behest, if that's a possibility.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we move anybody, I'd like to get into committee of the whole. Could I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Grant and Councillor Giddings, thank you. Is there any objection? There being no objection, that carries, and we are in committee of the whole. Are there any separations or questions about consent items this evening? Councillor O'Meara.
Your Worship, I'd be happy to move the consent items, but I would like to separate 7.6 and 7.7, please.
All right. Well then, I'm going to accept your suggestion and we'll stand the consent items down since they're not consent tonight. And we will move to section 9.5, the OEC quarterly update and AGM. Is that the will of council? Any objection? All right, using my authority to move things around, that's where we are. And we will now give the floor to Rob Lister, the President and CEO of Oakville Enterprises Corporation. Welcome, Mr. Lister. Council and the public are looking forward to your report.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Great, well, thank you very much for moving us up in the agenda. Really appreciate that. So good evening, Mayor Burton, councillors. Very happy to be here tonight to provide an update from OEC and some information on the highlights of 2022 and our financial performance in 2022. Today with me, I have Scott Moody, who is the EVP and Chief Energy Transformation Officer. I have Laura Wilson, who is our Chief Financial Officer, and Mary Caputi, who's our EVP, Chief of Staff, and Corporate Development. And online, I believe also is Mr. Brennan, our Chair of OEC. So evening, maybe there we go. I will present the proposed directors for the OEC board and the Oakville Hydro board. Then I'll speak to OEC's exciting growth and share some of the highlights from 2022. And then I will turn it over to Laura Wilson, our CFO, to talk about the 2022 financial highlights. So this slide has the proposed slate of board of directors for the OEC board and the Oakville Hydro board. And so from left to right, we have Mayor Burton, Jane Clohessy, Jane Allen, David Brennan, Siobhan Byron, Lucy Casasilla, Helen Palmer, Ian Cockwell, Patrick Crowley, Paul Pastrick, Harold Holloway, Cheryl Watson, and Timothy Smith. So our organization has continued to perform well in 2022. We continue to grow and expand nationally with now over 2,500 employees delivering projects coast to coast, from design and engineering to construction and field services. In August, we announced our new partnership with Enbridge and their investment in OEC. And as we work to build and drive inclusion, most recently, we advanced our Indigenous initiatives through OEC's commitment to the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Businesses Progressive Aboriginal Relations Program, also known as PAR. We continue to drive our business forward and support critical infrastructure initiatives and innovation for our customers. An example which I have given to present to council before is a tool in its groundbreaking ability to connect every municipality into a single platform, creating a significant efficiency for the province. This is one example of PlanView's One Window, a leading edge location intelligence tool that streamlines municipal consent and the right-of-way permitting in a single application. We've also received recognition with significant industry awards. Oakville Hydro was recognized with the Local Distribution Company Performance Excellence Award from the Electricity Distributors Association. And Oakville Hydro achieved the Sustainable Electricity Leader brand established by Electricity Canada, based primarily on the ISO 26000 guidance on social responsibility. Now, our group of companies services the infrastructure, energy, renewable generation, electricity, and gas distribution sectors with over 2,500 employees. Insightful and reliable energy and infrastructure solutions are provided to our clients across Canada. Our group of companies deliver end-to-end solutions from conception and design to engineering, construction, and again, comprehensive field services. This slide represents the breadth of our service areas that we work with our clients, as we focus on our extensive growth strategy. OEC has a diverse customer base ranging from telecommunication firms, utilities, municipalities, and infrastructure builders, to name a few. Now, Oakville Hydro reliability. Reliability service is the cornerstone of electricity supply. Oakville Hydro's reliability results ended favorably in 2022 as compared to 2021 and previous years. On average, year-end results show that customers experienced, on average, less than 1 interruption in 2022, and on average experienced a total of less than 22 minutes without electricity supply. These are very favorable results that underscore how Oakville Hydro is strengthening the resilience of its grid. Recently, we welcomed the Honourable Minister of Energy, Todd Smith, at our office to officially launch Oakville Hydro's Green Button capabilities. And Councillor Chisholm joined us, and appreciate that. The platform will allow families and businesses in Oakville to track and control their energy use and save money on their monthly bills. Studies have found that access to energy data with Green Button, along with smartphone applications, can help customers achieve energy savings of up to 18%. As I mentioned earlier, OEC recently announced its commitment to the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Businesses PAR program. The PAR program provides a high level of assurance on measurable outcomes and initiatives in 4 performance areas: leadership actions, employment, business development, and community relations. OEC recognizes the value of working with Indigenous communities to partner in business, gain cultural awareness, and provide career opportunities. We look forward to continuing to build meaningful, long-term relationships with Indigenous communities. Our industry-leading safety program continues to progress. Oakville Hydro has achieved an incredible milestone. It was recognized by the Infrastructure Health and Safety Association with the achievement of more than 2 million hours of work time without lost term incident. And this represents over 11 years without a lost time incident. So I'm very proud of the Oakville Hydro employees for achieving this level of safety performance. Recently, PVS and GTEL attained core certification, the first locate service providers to achieve this designation in Ontario. Designation for our 3 construction companies, Transpower, Terraflex, and Elcon, as well as EMB and British Columbia, are well underway. Now, CORE, which is short for Certificate of Recognition, is an occupational health and safety accreditation program that verifies a fully implemented safety and health management system meeting national standards. So growth. Our infrastructure services operations have achieved significant growth over 2022. The Western Canadian expansion is well underway. A recent employee recruitment program in Ontario and Alberta, including radio, social media, and website advertising, virtual job fairs, and more, resulted in excellent results. We also have mobile advertising through RAPS that has been launched for both GTEL and PVS trucks to promote that we're hiring. So to date, we've hired over 200 new staff for the spring construction season, and there should be the PVS vehicle traveling around Oakville, so keep your eyes open for that. So as it relates to growth, in a few minutes, Laura will share our projections for significant dividend growth in the coming years. Oakville Hydro's electrification strategy, preparing for an electrified future, was prepared in conjunction with Grid Smart City. Grid Smart City is a consortium of 13 local distribution companies. The Grid Smart City members cumulatively manage almost $3 billion in assets and serve almost 800,000 customers across 40 communities in Ontario. The development of the electrification strategy considered climate change policy, greenhouse gas reductions and regulatory frameworks, future scenarios of decarbonization of transportation, building, heating, and a net zero economy, and the impacts of electrification on the energy bulk system and local distribution networks. 4 strategies are outlined for the electrification success. There's system planning, grid operations, design practices, and innovation technology. The government is focused on balancing high levels of reliability and affordable rates while meeting net zero targets and greening the economy. Accelerating the decarbonization of transportation, heating, cooling, and electricity generation will require an increase of 2 to 3 times the current generation capacity in Ontario, and will create an opportunity to deploy large amounts of capital, require tens of thousands of new workers, and the adoption of new technologies not yet invented. Electrification will offer unprecedented opportunities and challenges for the sector, and these strategies will prepare Oakville Hydro and its customers for an electrified future. So at this point, I will ask Laura to come forward and speak to our 2022 financial results.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I am pleased to present our 2022 financial highlights. The business landscape throughout 2022 was volatile as the economy emerged from the impacts of a global pandemic. Inflation reached its highest since 1983. Supply chain pressures dominated 2022 with material and equipment shortages and longer lead times impacting OEC's operations. Nearly every Canadian industry was impacted by a labor shortage, with unemployment rates at a historic low. OEC has been able to navigate many of these challenges and advance performance in most areas. The diversity of the OEC portfolio, discipline in cost management, productivity using technology, and commitment to servicing customers solidified positive outcomes. OEC finished 2022 with $24 million in total comprehensive income, including full-year operations for the 2021 acquisitions of EMB Management, DPM Energy, and TransPower. Payments to the town were $13.8 million, including the annual dividend payment of $6.1 million. Shareholders' equity at December 31st, 2022 was $171.8 million. OEC has evolved over the last 15 years with many transformational achievements and a growth culture that is focused on increasing shareholder value. Over the last 5 years, assets have grown from just over $400 million to $766 million. We are excited about the potential for dividend growth over the next few years, trending in the range of $11 to $15 million by 2026. That concludes today's presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Council, are there questions? I will note that we have a delegation from the public, Mr. Sauvageau. Councillor Elgar.
I can wait until the end, but I do have a question regarding our Hydro One policies related to solar panels, so I can wait until the end. Maybe perhaps Scott Moody can help me.
Councillor, that's an important and current question, so I don't see any need to wait for that. Mr. Lister, maybe you'd like to let Councillor Elgar, could you frame your question for them, and then let's let Mr. Lister decide who answers it.
I thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. My question is, it's very important that solar, everyone gets involved in it. We're all working for solar energy. I think throughout Oakville, we're doing everything we can. However, I'm being made aware of an individual house who wants to put in a 10 kilowatt system, which would probably allow him to be almost like off the grid from a cost point of view. It's very expensive to do that, but he is willing to do it. But apparently, it's not Oakville Hydro that is the problem. It is Hydro One that is restricting him through a policy not to be able to do that. I wonder if Oakville Hydro can help me understand why that could ever happen, especially when we're all pushing for zero carbon emissions. So I'm not sure who can answer that, but it certainly is an interesting question for me to ask the Oakville Hydro Association. It's amazing. I was shocked to hear that. So
Councillor,
I look forward to the answer.
Scott Moody is here for you. Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, Councillor Elgar. Yes, it is an unfortunate circumstance. There's a large portion of Oakville that is under what's called a short circuit capacity. So there's a station called Palermo that Hydro One owns, and that station is aging, and there are certain limitations and which limits our ability to connect not only solar, but most distributed energy resources in Oakville. We've met with Hydro One on several occasions. In fact, just last week, met with some senior executives with Hydro One to make sure that they're aware of the case and to investigate what we can do to help make the necessary changes to alleviate those connection limitations. So that is true at the moment, Councillor Elgar.
So this has been going on for 8 years, I understand. And what can we do to get to the province to correct this problem? Like 8 years seems like a long time for people that are trying to become energy efficient in Ontario, and especially Oakville. And what can we do?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor. The case lays right now with Hydro One and their capital plans. Again, we will be working with Hydro One staff, including executives, to try and make the case for that investment into Palermo. There is some upcoming investments and plans for that station, but it won't be in this year, and it won't affect or benefit parts of Oakville that are under that limitation this year.
So is it further than the Glen Abbey, or is it just Glen Abbey that is impacted by this Hydro One restriction?
It's not, it doesn't work in terms of wards or streets. They're depending on where the feeders are that come from Palermo and how that impacts our distribution system. So if you looked at a map of Oakville, almost right down the middle, there would be a path there where north of Upper Middle and south of QE would be okay, but there's a middle path in there that is significantly impaired. I'm sorry, you might be on mute.
If there's anything we can do as a council, I really would appreciate your input. So thank you very much, Scott.
Quite welcome, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. Does Oakville Hydro have a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy or policy, and in particular with regards to its board recruitment policies?
I didn't catch the last, sorry, through you, Mr. I didn't catch the last part of the
Does
question.
Oakville Hydro have a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, in particular with regards to its board recruitment policies?
There is not a defined policy at the moment, but they follow good recruitment practices, but it's not well-defined at this point in time.
So I might hope that the board at some point would maybe emphasize that. It's been a couple of boards that we've appointed here that I think are probably lacking a little bit in our diversity, equity, and inclusion with regards to what Oakville's made up with. But I'm just hoping we can take that in and factor that in, and if that's a policy.
So in the past, however, sorry, Mr. Brennan.
Can I offer a couple of words?
If I'm finished, you can. Yeah, that's fine.
Are you ready?
Please, fire away, Mr. Brennan.
Okay, yes. So to your point, Sean, Councillor McMeer, we recently retained a search consultant, a Lakeshore Capital, an Oakville business, Mandeep Gruel, to do a search in Oakville. As you know, we focus on Oakville and to look for qualified senior executives. And part of the mandate we gave him was to look for diversity, gender and otherwise diversity. And he came back with a group of people, and we did have ethnic and gender diversity in it. And so that as Rob says, we don't have a formal policy, but we are actively trying to find more diverse candidates. And the last effort was with this search consultant. And and our limitations are right now we're focused on Oakville residents, and we're doing the best we can, but it's diversity that's qualified for the work and to fit our skills matrix. So appreciate your question. We're working on it, and you're seeing the results as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Chair Brennan, and that's all I was hoping for. That's fantastic. I appreciate it's on the radar. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, we've gotten off track from hearing the public delegation. Potentially, I'm just reminding you of that. I see nothing wrong with waiting the delegate until every member has had their questions. Councillor Grant, you're next.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually very happy that Councillor Elgar brought up that issue earlier. We had a similar issue in our ward where a gentleman was renovating his house, wanted to put, well, I sent you the email over this, but yeah, and it was explained to me that the Hydro One station is too old and can't handle the download. But I'm wondering, given that we're in these types of meetings quarterly, can we get quarterly updates about what's going on with Palermo at least and figure out at what time all these people, and it seems to be, looking at the red swath that goes across that area, it seems to be a lot of older homes, and you've got people moving in, younger families, renovating, wanting to save money, and it'd be nice to know when we can give them assurances that if they are looking to upgrade their electrical systems to some form of solar, that they can do that. So thank you to Councillor Elgar for that, and hopefully we can include that as part of our quarterly meetings, and hopefully it'll happen sooner than in the next quarter, but we'll see. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be quick, and it's a comment, not a question. But just, Mr. Lister, just to you and the OEC team, congratulations on the 2 million hours worked without a lost time incident. That's quite significant, and it shows a culture of safety. So congratulations on that, because that's amazing milestone.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of council, I will thank you for the projection of healthy increases in the annual dividend. Those dividends are among the resources that council is looking to support our downtown cultural hub plans. So it's no small matter. All right, Mr. Lister, we thank you for your information, and we will now release you, and I'd like you to stand by while we hear from our delegation, Mr. Pierre Sauvageau.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Welcome, Mr. Sauvageau. Council looks forward to your information.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I just had a few questions in regards to the consolidated financial statements in Appendix A. Reference to page 60, but it's page 55 in the financial statements, Appendix A. In regards to operating expenses, just curiosity as to why the cost of vehicles increased, actually almost doubled the cost. I wonder if council can ask the question on my behalf to OEC. Secondly, in regards to air and travel, there's like $2,505,000. I'm not too sure what that relates to, all that travel and air time. And the third point is in regards to other. There's $6,378,000, and last year was only $713,000. I'm just wondering why there's such a large amount, and if possible, that staff can elaborate on that amount, why it's so like over 6 million. And the next year is in regards to page 63 of the report, or 58 of the consolidated notes. Just wonder if as well can elaborate as to salaries, bonuses, and other short-term benefits. From 2021 to 2022, it went up by 1.2 million. I'm just wondering, is it because of new directors and not directors, pardon me, new senior management in the various new companies which OEC purchased? Just possible if you could ask OEC in regard to those items. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sauvageau, for your questions. We'll stand you down and we'll call back Oakville Enterprises.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. There were a number of questions in there, which I hope that I can catch all of them. The increase in vehicle expense is largely due to the growth of our organization. In the period late 2020 and into 2021, we acquired 4 businesses, TransPower being the largest, which would explain the increase in most of the expenses that have been referenced, including wages and travel, which is also related to vehicles. And inflation also played a large factor, with fuel costs going up and rental vehicle costs increasing as well. Inflation was significant as it related to fleet. I think that I've captured, because really the acquisitions, those acquisitions account for most of the growth in all of our expenses without anything other than that being specific.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Council and the public appreciate your information. All right, Council, is there someone who would like to move 9.4 and 10.1, given that Mr. Lister already broke the suspense on that item? Councillor Hazlet-Deal, thank you. What?
It's 9.5.
Sorry, 9.5. I was looking right at it when I thought I said 9.5. But anyway, 9.5 and 10.1. It's moved by Councillor Hazlet-Deal. We're in committee of the whole. We do not need a second. Is there any objection to Councillor Hazlet-Deal's motion? There being none, that's carried. And I thank everybody for their help with that item. And we will now revert to the consent items. And Councillor O'Meara, could you remind me which items you wanted to separate?
It was 7.6 and 7.7, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I get a motion for the balance of the consent items? Councillor Chisholm, thank you.
Councilor O'Meara already moved
I didn't hear the motion.
initially. Sorry.
All right. Councillor O'Meara, thank you for the motion I didn't hear, along with the numbers. Councillor Chisholm, I thank you for your spirit of cooperation. I'm going to put the vote on the consent items that are not separated. Is there any objection to the unseparated consent items? Madam Clerk, there being none, they're carried on Councillor O'Meara's motion. Councillor O'Meara, 7.6.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I've read in here about sort of all the reserves that we have on in the number of issues. Appendix E has the reserves that we have on cash and lieu, bonusing, et cetera, for 2022. Do we have any information on what reserves we have, or what bonusing and money is left in bonusing on previous years, or just that's outstanding in general, not just on 2022?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we do report annually on this, so we can provide you with that information.
Okay, yeah, I would appreciate that. And I guess to go along with that question is, nothing seems to be getting cheaper the longer we wait. So I'm wondering if there is a bit of a motivation to look at what we've got left with regards to bonusing and find programs now to start to spend that money, so it's not just sitting in account waiting for some budget deliberation one day. I'm wondering if is that a budget request perhaps, or maybe, Commissioner, you might be best to figure out how we motivate that money to get spent?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we will take that into consideration as we're developing our plans going forward.
Perfect, thank you so much for that. Your Worship, do you want me to just go right into 7.7, or would you like me to?
I would be delighted if you would dispatch 7.7.
At the appropriate time, I have a question on 7.6.
Yeah,
Well then,
yeah.
line up
7.6.
and start your questions. Councillor Chisholm, I recognize you first, then
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar.
Thank you, Worship. It just piqued my my interest with respect to the reserves, or in the development of money sitting in reserves. Do we have to go to the budget committee for recommendations to start using these monies for projects in our community? Or can we make a motion at council, or do we have to go through the budget committee? Just for clarity's sake.
Through you, Mayor Burton, you can do in-year spending. However, the budget process is an excellent opportunity for you to look at the priorities overall across the entire town, and then decide how it's best to assign those priorities. So you do have an option but we traditionally use the budget process so that that prioritization discussion can occur.
I guess the concern I have, and Councilor Mayor's comments are well-founded with respect to speeding up some of these projects. When we have to go through what I believe the correct process through the Budget Committee, there is a long gap of time. And we know the money's it's the reserves. It's not like it's new budgeted money. I'd like to see that if we could do some quick turnarounds for some projects that we have on the books, instead of waiting for a whole year to look at into the Budget Committee and hopefully get approval for it, knowing full well the money is already in reserve. So I'm just saying if there's kind of a diamond lane or a fast lane to proceed rather than going through the budget process.
Through you, Mayor Burton, we could actually perhaps report a little bit earlier on what is remaining in the bonusing, so you have a good understanding of what's there and available for projects. I would also add that as we put that budget together, we look at our resourcing abilities in order to make sure we have the resources in order to deliver on the budget plan. So we'd need to take that into consideration of any new projects we'd be adding. But we'll bring that report forward so you have a good idea of what funding is there and available.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar?
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Burton, to staff. I note that in 2022 was $2,567,000 that the taxpayers contributed to the exemptions, but I'm not worried about that so much as I am the Bill 23, which is additional statutory exemptions and discounts. And does staff have any idea what the impact could be on the taxpayers of Oakville based on being able to project what our 2023 numbers will be? I read in the report that we will get that information at a future annual report, but do we have any, like, I'm sure we must have some projections of what the impact could be, and I'd love to know what they are for the taxpayers to subsidize the development.
Through you, Mayor Burton, we were asked to report back to council on a monthly basis on that, and we will be as part of the CAO update for this month. I can tell you that to April of this year, the phase-in has impacted us $1.4 million, and the DC 108, the Bill 108 rate freeze, $4.8 million. So you will be receiving that information on a monthly basis of the actual losses that we're seeing, and we will. Oh, pardon me.
Part of it was done, but I'm just watching. You're working on the salad?
Looks like we have some extra cross-traffic on the audio channel. Does IT have a handle on that? Well, maybe let's be optimistic. Let's assume that problem's over, and let's go back to Ms. Sully for the rest of her answer.
So we will be reporting on a monthly basis, as well as part of the budget forecast report that will be coming in July. We will provide additional information that we have up until this point in time.
So, Nancy, thank you so much. So even though it was 2.6 million last year, already as of now, did you hear 1.4 million? And there was something else at 4.8 million. Like, can you just clarify? Because something happened in the feedback.
Through you, Mayor Burton. So the amount that's reflected there for the exemptions, that's the amount we have to fund for things that are exempted from DCs. Now with Bill 23, we are tracking the impact. Right now, it's primarily because of the phase-in of the rates, and that has impacted us $1.4 million to the end of April. As well, Bill 108 provided a rate freeze. So the funds that we've lost on that because the rates were frozen at the time of the planning application is tracking at 4.8 million to date, life to date.
So unless we are made whole, if I'm not incorrect, that means we, the taxpayers of Oakville, are going to be funding that shortfall, correct?
We will be looking at that and how we go forward, whether we have to phase things in, look at our service levels, or look for alternative funding sources. Yes, it is a loss to us, though.
Wow. I thank you for that information, Nancy. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Commissioner Sully. You mentioned the tracking. Does that include the request from Councillor Adams through the budget process in terms of the development so they can track the shortfall or the variance, rather?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, it does. We thought the best way for now to report to you on a monthly basis in order to ensure it's timely is to include it as part of the CAO update.
Thank you. And you've included on page 69 the chart in terms of the discounts that are being applied over 4 years. Can you remind me, is that cumulative or is that just a straight 50% reduction, or is it cumulative?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the discounting requires us to discount the rates for that period of time by 20% and then 15%, et cetera. So any applications coming in that are paying DCs, whatever the rate is, we have to discount it by that amount.
So that 50% will actually be closer to 60%?
Oh, no, I apologize. No, it's not cumulative. It starts at 20 and then it reduces down until it gets to 0.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. I think I'm going to try to put the vote on 7.6 and see if we can consent to that. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and consent item 7.6 has been consented to. Let's move on to 7.7. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. To staff, just going over the site alteration bylaw, we've had ongoing discussions for a number of years about road cuts and about sideway cuts and sidewalk cuts and the interface with which that happens. We were developing a licensing system. We were developing a permitting system. I'm not sure what happened there. I don't see road cuts getting any better. In fact, I still see them the same. I see developers build quick, sell a house, leave it for the new owner, and the town ends up having to spend that. So are we looking at any sort of a licensing or security deposit for road cuts or anything to protect our municipal infrastructure and assets, and so that as new homes get infill homes get built on streets, that residents aren't left with unintentional speed bumps up and down their roads? Is there any way that we can look at that in this bylaw, or do we have something coming down the pipe?
Through you, Mr. Burton, Mr. Mayor. So we have recently implemented a new road cut process. The road cut process is not part of the site alteration bylaw provisions. It is under the municipal right-of-way bylaw, and that new process, the change for that is originally we had the homeowners of the infill developments being the applicant of those permits and providing the securities for that permit. We find that the responsibility should lie with the contractor who's doing the actual work. So the change in the process is that we have the applicant being the contractor now, and they will be the ones that are providing the securities and closing out the permit properly and have that inspection passed before we release that securities back to the contractor.
Okay, so that's not a part of any site plan then? That's a secondary application, or that's a different application that they get?
Correct. It's additional to the infill development application.
Okay, and we are charging as securities then? We are holding as securities for that then?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is additional securities coming from the contractor.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
I'm going to put the vote then. Is there any objection to Councillor O'Meara's motion to consent item 7.7? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, so we are out of the consents. And that brings us to our several discussion items tonight. And we're going to start with the 2022 Audit Findings Report. And if you give your attention to Jade Surgener, the Manager of Accounting, we will begin.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. So I'm here to speak to both 9.1 and 9.2 on the agenda. And so 9.1 is the receipt of the audit findings report prepared by KPMG, our external auditors. And 9.2 is to approve the work that KPMG audited. So the 2022 consolidated financial statements for the town as well as the trust. And so with these two agenda items really going hand in hand, with the approval of Mayor Burton, I'd like to start with a few words on the financial statements, then introduce our auditors to walk through the results of their audit findings report, and then I'd happily speak to any questions on the financial statements, so agenda 9.2 after the auditors. So in terms of the audit, the town is required to prepare annual financial statements, which must be audited by an external audit firm and approved by council. These financial statements are consolidated, which means that they include the results of the business improvement areas, the town itself, Oakville Public Library, Oakville Enterprises Corporation, and Oakville Municipal Development Corporation. And so although consolidated within the town results, these individual entities all produce their own financial statements, which are also audited and have been or will be approved by their respective boards. Another item to note is that as a municipality, these consolidated statements are prepared in accordance with public sector accounting standards. And the reason I highlight this is it's very different than what we're used to seeing for budget purposes. And so to assist council and other users of the financial statements, Appendix C is put together to reconcile the results of the operating surplus from a budget standpoint to what we include in the town's annual surplus on the financial statements. And so just to walk through one example of why we get some differences. So one example is the development charges and contributions from developers. So for budget purposes, we don't always budget the revenues associated with them, but for accounting purposes, we have contributed assets from subdivision developers, so that's approximately $137 million. And we also have revenues from capital projects that are not budgeted for operating purposes, but are included as revenues on the financial statement purposes. And so both audited statements and operating budgets have their unique and specific purposes. And financial statements are more on the compliance side and an attempt to have comparability between the municipalities, whereas the budget process is really focused on a cash basis and the tax levy required to operate the town's activities. And so at this time, I'll pass things along to KPMG to present on their audit findings report, which is items 9.1 on your agenda. And so joining us today are Carlos Alvarez and Matt Ciradelli. And so Carlos is the audit partner on the engagement, and Matt Ciradelli, the audit senior manager.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Matt and I are pleased to present the audit findings for 2022. There are a few slides that we will make specific note of to you. There are a couple items that we think are significant and material to bring forward to your attention. For those who are following along in their package, we can begin on page 180, which is the audit highlight slide. Overall, I can confirm to all of you that we are substantially complete. There are a few procedures that remain, all of which are very customary to where we are in the audit process. In terms of how we executed the audit, there were no significant changes compared to the original audit plan. No surprises in terms of the procedures that we performed. Two, I would say, notable events. One is the transaction with OEC on the dilution of your percentage ownership from 100% down to 90%. That would be an individually significant transaction that has been fully recognized in your financial statements. I would like to add that additional disclosures have been added to your financial statements that describe that event. And certainly disclosures form an important part of your financial statements. The second notable item would be with respect to an audit misstatement. As a reminder, we as auditors do not audit all of the transactions. We do have what we call a audit tolerance threshold. For the 2022 audit, that audit threshold was set at $560,000. Over the course of our audit, we did detect a misstatement that significantly exceeded that threshold. It was approximately $15 million in total. That adjustment has been corrected by your management team and is reflected in the draft financial statements included in your package. We did raise and highlight a control observation to your management team. In our view, whenever you have a audit misstatement of that magnitude, it is important to have an observation to follow up on in subsequent years to ensure that that does not repeat itself on a go-forward basis. And we can get into some of the specifics on that misstatement a little bit further in the presentation. In terms of how the debits and credits came together in these financial statements, there were no changes in any of the underlying accounting standards. I would like to highlight that next year, for your fiscal 2023 year, there is a very significant new accounting standard, and it is entitled Asset Retirement Obligations. We've already had some preliminary discussions with management just because it is that significant, but that'll be something for next year. It is not applicable for 2022. Skipping forward 2 slides. As a reminder and consistent with our audit plan, for every single audit in Canada, we are always required to respond to the risk of fraud. Fraud does happen. There's 2 specific risks that we are required to respond to. I can confirm to all of you that based on all of our testing, all of the documents that we examined, all of the manual journal entries that we reviewed and audited, all of the transactions were above board. We did not detect anything that would be considered suspicious or actual acts of fraud. So in that respect, it is a clean report with respect to fraud. I will turn it over to Matt just to go through some of the more detailed areas of the audit.
Great, thank you very much, Carlos. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I will ask us to skip ahead 2 slides, and I'll begin talking about some of the meat and potatoes of the audit, where we spent the majority of our time and our findings. Starting with tangible capital assets. So certainly consistent with any audit in the municipal sector, that represents a very material balance on the financial statements, and as such is worthy of our attention as auditors. We do a complete roll forward, taking the ending positions of the tangible capital asset ledger as at last period and roll that forward to the end of this period, auditing the additions and disposals as well as transfers from work in progress. As Carlos alluded to earlier, and as management has described in more detail on page 175 of your package, we did have one audit misstatement related to this area that we identified during the audit. That relates to the 16 Mile Community and Library project. At a high level, this was an internal transfer or a adjustment that really had 2 parts, and the second part is what is being corrected here. A portion of the North Park lands that were funded through development charges were not removed from the asset ledger, and they were required to be taken off with the offsetting flowing through net surplus through the statement of operations. Effectively, it was a simple miscommunication between departments, and the asset management department and accounting department missed connecting to book this second portion of the entry. As such, and as Carlos did mention, we did flag a minor control observation, which we'll profile in more detail in a few slides. So we will pick back up on this topic. Other than this finding, No other matters to report. This was a one-time and non-frequent occurrence, this type of transaction. So we are quite confident that this is an isolated issue and have reported it as such. Moving on to the next slide, please. Post-employment benefit liabilities represent a complex estimate requiring management's judgment to compute. As such, they do involve a third-party actuary to assist with that process. This is, again, a very material amount and would be an area of audit focus across nearly all municipalities. What we can say is this year, a new valuation was done from scratch. That does occur every few years, which means records were sent from the Accounting and Human Resources Department to that third-party actuary management had engaged. We worked with those groups at the town to audit the data sent to the actuary to ensure that they were provided an accurate and complete package with which to perform their work. That was a clean exercise. We do not have any findings to report in that regard. From there, we also vet the assumptions used by management's experts in order to ensure that the report that is provided to management, which is used to compute the number you see on your financial statements, is accurate. One thing to highlight is certainly with the inflationary environment, the discount rate used by the actuary increased significantly from the previous version of their report, nearly doubling, sitting at approximately 5%, which is in line based on benchmarks and performing audit tests on that number. So all in all, that number is a change from the previous report, but no issues with the approach management has taken, nor the work of that third-party expert. Moving on. Carlos alluded to the fact that next year a significant change is coming to the accounting standards in the public sector related to asset retirement obligations. As such, this is the final year the management team at the town was able to apply the existing standard, which is referred to as contaminated sites rather than asset retirement obligations. The current standard is much less invasive and demanding with respect to the estimates and reporting management must do in order to estimate these future liabilities. As such, they've taken a similar approach to the prior period, and we are happy to say that that approach was applied correctly. We have no concerns with management's approach in this final year. They are allowed to apply it. That said, again, next year, this will be a heavy topic of discussion and certainly one that we've been working with management to keep our finger on the pulse of as they progress. Moving on one more slide, please. I will touch on the significant, unusual one-time transaction that Carlos mentioned in the summary. That is the dilution of the ownership interest in OEC by the town. At a high level, you can see that that did result in a gain on dilution for accounting purposes on the town's financial statements. I will say that the transaction is quite complex as it is accounted for at the OEC level. However, at the town's level, the accounting treatment is different as they use different reporting standards, and the town accounts for their interest in the OEC using what is called the modified equity method under the public sector accounting standards. Effectively, what this means is there was a one-time adjustment that took effect as of the effective date of that share transaction. The town accounted for its gain on the dilution of shares, and on a go-forward basis, will continue to account for its 90% interest rather than 100, which would have been the process prior to that transaction. So certainly want to mention that management and KPMG were well aware of this well before the audit, and much of the legwork was done in the interim audit period. However, quite a bit of complexity. So happy to point to everyone to management if there are more questions on this, knowing that it is a significant one-time transaction. Moving on in our report, you can see on this page the quantification of the adjustment related to tangible capital assets. So you can see here $15 million just above was the magnitude. Worth noting here that you do see an impact to other revenue. However, as mentioned, this is effectively catching up and posting part 2 of this internal transaction. So the intended net on the ending surplus position was nil. This adjustment was just required to marry up what was intended with what had already been booked.
And maybe Matt, just to add, we may have used the word minor, but certainly it's material in magnitude. And certainly, again, we'll look to, working with management to ensure that, from a root cause perspective, that it simply does not repeat itself in subsequent periods. And then moving along to the next slide, other than that one matter that we just discussed, we were comfortable with the other processes that you have in place, and there were no other control observations, whether they were deemed significant or not, that we encountered as part of the audit process. Moving forward to page 191, if you were to line up your financial statements for 2022 with the prior year, again, other than that dilution event, all of the disclosures would be very consistent and the verbiage would be very consistent with the prior year. Also important to note that within the financial statements, there is a draft auditor's report. That audit report is unqualified. Simply, that means that it was a clean audit report, no reservations of any sort. The audit report, has the word independent included in the title. I can confirm with all of you that we have remained independent throughout the audit period. It's a cornerstone of our profession. And to give you a sense as to, one of the lines in the sand that we always need to be watchful for as external auditors is that we can never be in a position where we are acting in the capacity of management. And I can confirm with you that we did not do so and that we remained independent throughout the audit period. I am not planning on going through each of the appendices, which go from A to H. Again, we've already commented on the audit report. We've already commented on the new accounting standard that will be effective for the subsequent year. I would like to highlight that we did receive the full cooperation of your management team. They were responsive and timely, and that we were able to fulfill our professional obligations and complete all of the procedures that we set out to do. So with that, that would conclude what I would call the formal topics as part of our audit findings presentation.
All right, thank you. Maybe you would like to clarify that one little point that you started. You have a draft opinion, and it becomes a final opinion upon a key event here tonight. Maybe not every member of council is familiar with financial statements.
Certainly, through you, Your Worship, under the Canadian auditing standards, financial statements are held in draft until they are approved by the governance body that manages the organization. And in this case, that would be council. So once council approves a set of financial statements, only then can they go final after that occurs.
And your audit opinion. So thank you very much for that. Ms. Surgener, are you done as well?
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, let's find out how many questions we've got. We also have a delegation on the financial statements. Council, would you like to hear the delegation while you think of questions, or do you have questions now? Madam Clerk, would you call the registered delegation, Mr. Pierre Sojo?
Pierre?
Welcome, Mr. Sauvageau. Council looks forward to your information.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Burton and councillors. I just had a couple of questions in regards to item 9.2, the financial statements report, Appendix A, specifically the notes. Note 5, investment in Oakville Enterprise Corporation. Just from my perspective, as well as probably the various citizens within the town of Oakville, why did the town dilute its interest in OAC, especially when I heard tonight that it's anticipated the revenues will be increasing at OEC. Thus, if we remained at 100%, we would receive a larger share of their profits. I just wonder if you can elaborate on that. And another area is in regards to the put options. As part of the note, it says, where is it? This right does not expire until such time that the subscriber of the 222 Class B common shares has either increased their investment in the corporation beyond 10% or upon delivering 3 put notices. I wonder if possible, can you elaborate on what those put options are? Because to be honest, I'm a little bit out of date in regards to put options. So I wonder if you can explain to me what that relates to. And another question is in regards to continuing on the investment of Oakville Enterprise Corporation, page 18 of the notes. It says we will be reporting quarterly. Yes, in regards to share issuance costs of $746,000, I looked at the various purchases throughout the year on a quarterly basis. The town's supposed to report any purchases in excess of $100,000, but I didn't see any reference to that share issuance cost. That's $746,000. What specifically, which firm was used? Were there more than one firm? Because the town is supposed to report on amounts greater than $100,000. And lastly, on government external transfers, on page 32 of the notes, there's Ontario grants, specifically there's an audit and accountability fund of $408,000, which the town received presumably based on revenues here. Just wondering what those funds were used for, or has any of it been used for, and what sort of reports or investigations, whatever, has the town done except for the external audit, which is separate. And those are my specific questions relating to the financial statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sauvageau.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn to Ms. Sully to lead off, and it looks like she's going to hand it off to Jonathan Vanderheiden. So we've got, when did the investment in OEC come? Could there be a little bit of, the gentleman wanted to understand why there's a gain on dilution, and he also wanted to know about the $746,000 in share issue costs, and then the page 32 $408,000 grant. What are we using that for? Is what I heard. Mr. Vanderheiden.
Thank you, Mayor Burton, and through you in response to those questions. I'll work backwards on them. So the funds that were received from the province, so those were very specific, it's a very specific fund that the province has established for municipalities to use for specific initiatives. I believe there were a number of different initiatives that we had this past year. I don't remember the specifics of each one off the top of my head. I do believe some of them were on our website as a condition of receiving those funds. If council would request more details on each one, we can certainly provide that. In response to the question on the share issuance costs in the note from OEC, I believe the delegate's question was in regards to which firm was used and what the nature of those were. Those are the share issuance costs that Oakville Hydro or Oakville Enterprises Corporation incurred as part of the dilution work. So that's something that we take from their financial statements. That is not a question that we're able to answer as it relates to their financial statements. I don't believe they're here anymore to help answer that question, but should council want that, we could reach out to them to help answer that question.
The gentleman seemed to be concerned about the town having an obligation to report $100,000 or more, and you've answered that it wasn't the town, it was OEC. So I hope that that satisfies the gentleman. And then how the dilution worked, why we had a gain on it, was his second question. And his first question was, when did we do this anyway?
So this was through you, Mayor Burton. So the work was completed this year for the town to divest itself of 10% of Oakville Enterprises Corporation to Enbridge. And I believe that was done in August this past year. The gain in dilution is related to how the accounting actually works for the change in ownership. That is a function of changing the ownership structure in relation to how much the corporation is worth on our books. As Mr. Alvarez or Mr. Chiardelli mentioned earlier, we use modified equity accounting, and this is the result of that type of accounting that we use. And so that handles the gain part. I believe there was a question of put options, and I'm going to refer to David, to David Huckwith to help answer that one.
Thank you. With respect to the put, Your Worship, that was part of the shareholders agreement that we entered into with the minority shareholder. Because the shares do not trade on any public stock exchange, it's typical in these types of transactions to have an ability for the minority shareholder to sell their shares through what is called a put, or for the majority shareholder to acquire the shares through a call. There's a period of time, I believe off the top of my head, it was 3 years before any of those could be exercised, but they're usual transactions in a situation where you have a 90% shareholder and a 10% shareholder to provide some liquidity if there needs to be a rejigging of the situation.
Thank you very much. Those are very clear answers, and I appreciate the multitude of talent that it took to provide them. So, Council, I'm going to look for a mover for 9.1 and 9.2. Councillor Knoll, thank you. Is there an objection? There being no objection, Madam Clerk, 9.1 and 9.2 are adopted. That brings us to 9.3, the 2022 Economic Development Annual Report. Milan Bowie, the Senior Economic Officer, is available for questions, and in the absence of questions, I'm interested in a mover. Councillor Adams, thank you. Are there questions? May I put the vote? Is there an objection to the item? Councillor Adams, congratulations, your motion carries, and that 9.3 is adopted. Well, actually, it's received. 9.4 is the former public works site transfer to Oakville Municipal Development Corporation. We have staff available for any questions, and we have a delegation from Mr. Pierre Sauvageau. And Council, would you like to hear the delegation at this point? Madam Clerk, would you call the delegation?
Pierre, once again.
Thank
Welcome,
you,
sir. We're interested in your information.
Yes, just want to reiterate, my question in regards to last time was not the understanding of the dilution, but mainly with respect to why did the town decide to dilute from 100% down to 90%, because of the fact that we will have more revenues coming in the future based on the presentation done, which was done by OEC. So in regards to the first question I had last time on the financial statements of the town, the question wasn't answered. I just want to bring you that attention.
I beg your pardon. I didn't realize that you were unaware that last year the town, in effect, sold 10% of the company to a minority investor in return for $47.5 million in working capital, which has already begun to increase the growth of the company, its activities, and supported the projection earlier this evening of increasing dividends.
Okay, fair enough. I won't dwell on that anymore. In regards to 9.4, the former Public Works site, specifically, I have a concern with respect to objective number 4 in regards to certainty with private developers. I know the intention is to ensure that developers don't go buy the property and then put up in excess of the OPA which the town has in place. Now, it's great that it's stipulated that's the objective, but based on past experience, there was a property which was sold part of the old area, the hydro. It was, I can't remember the exact address, but it went, the original OPA had 6 stories and it went up to 9 because they appealed to the Oakville Land Tribunal. And this was settled out of court. The town agreed to the 9 stories. So I'm afraid that in future sales, which will happen with respect to that former Public Works land, that the developer will go to the Ontario Land Tribunal and then bump up the number of stories. And there's no way the town can do anything about it, preventing them to going to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Now, my suggestion would be, as part of any purchase and sale agreement with the developers, if the developer were to go to the Ontario Land Tribunal and they win the case, because it's likely they can, because we want more units of whatever housing, then the developer will be required to provide the town a penalty because they went to the Ontario Land Tribunal. That penalty can be either 50% of whatever profit. As it stands right now, there's no specific clause that I'm aware of that the town will put within the purchase and sale agreement through the Oakville Municipal Development Corporation. So it's a real concern because I've seen it happen in the past and I don't want it to happen again.
Is that it, Mr. Sutherland?
Yes, it is, Mayor Burton.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Madam CAO, would you like to explain the difference between then and this? And would you also like to perhaps read the rest of that note to flesh it out so that we understand that what you intend there?
Certainly, Mayor Burton. There's a difference between the 2 examples that the delegate had spoken to. In this particular case on the public work sites, the MDC would be going through an official plan and a zoning process and a subdivision process in order to reflect the appropriate zoning on that site. It was not the case in the other example that he had referred to. And so what this objective does is ensures that whatever agreements that are built between the MDC and a future purchaser, that there is the opportunity for us to reverse the sale, for lack of a better term, if those official plan and zoning requirements are not followed through with the purchaser.
And is it the case that we have, in other transactions in other parts of the town, successfully applied clauses to protect us from this danger?
Yes, we have applied this clause in other cases, and we have been successful in protecting ourselves.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Councillor Elgar now.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Burton, to staff. I note in the key facts that establish the height limits for the property through an OPA, and once council approved the OPA, ensure that is not appealed. Now, I'm curious why we're going with height limits right now when it seems in Midtown everything is floor space index. And I wonder if staff can explain why they're not using floor space index in this area rather than a height, which was a huge concern not very long ago at a recent meeting. So can staff explain why we're not mentioning floor space index at all and why all of a sudden we're back to height again? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Commissioner Garvey.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's no reference to either height specifically in terms of meters or FSI as a tool. FSI does regulate height to a certain extent. It depends on the numbers, but it's got to go through a complete council-led process on that, or council-involved process to determine the appropriate planning regime for the public works site. So there's nothing excluded. Our anticipation is that FSI will make a presence there as well, but we haven't determined anything like that or made our recommendations in any way, shape, or form.
So why am I reading in the report, establish the height limits for the property through an OPA? Height limits, when I think of that, I calculate that to number of stories. I'm just curious, what is different between what you've written here and what you're just telling me now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe it was just the choice of words. However, we have used stories in the past in certain parts of the town where it's appropriate. In other areas where certain goals are important, we used other indices, but it's too premature to say what's most appropriate and in this area. But in the areas where we're intensifying, the best way to regulate design and ensure that there's a variety of skyline is through FSI.
Here, we're not concerned about skyline at all then? It's just, but we're willing to go with height limits, even though it sounds like FSI sounds like the way to go. So I'm just curious. So I thank you for that. I guess I'll dig into this a little deeper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Commissioner, could you just return to the point that you might have said too quickly, where I heard you say that FSI is another way of limiting height. Could you help us understand that there's more than one way to deal with height?
Thank you, Mayor Burton. When you use FSI, there is a mathematical limitation to the extent to which a building can be constructed. That's the way the math works. You can only go so far based on the multiple factor of your land area. So it's not because you use an FSI doesn't mean height is unlimited. It's only it's regulated based on the mathematical formula relating the lot area to the building, the amount of building that's present. So there are instances where this is a very effective tool. That's what we're promoting in Midtown. Where council ultimately ends up is actually in your hands, but that's the way we're trying to describe height going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Burton. There's actually several references to height in the report, so I'm not, Councillor Elgar has covered it. In one of the non-financial objectives, I'm really pleased to see the inclusion of 100 affordable housing units on the property. But I wondered if somebody could just give us a little bit of a backdrop. How did you determine 100? And is there an intention to provide or engage Halton Region in the affordable units? And is there anything around ownership of those units versus to guarantee a longer term protection of their affordability in any of the negotiations that they're going to be doing with the developers?
Through you, Mayor Burton. Certainly, I would actually suggest that you may want to ask the CEO of the MDC in terms of how he would take this objective forward, because the town is setting out through this report is looking at the things that the town would want to achieve on this site. And so affordable housing units would be one thing we would want to achieve. I would suspect that the region would certainly be involved. They have been involved in every time that we've looked at affordable units because they do deliver them and they're a good mechanism to do it. So I would imagine that would be one of the first places actually to go to see how it could deliver affordable units. The report itself doesn't go into the long-term ownership. It just looks at providing that base of affordable units. If council wanted to look at any other provisions that they would ask the MDC to consider as they move forward, that may be a suggestion in terms of ensuring the long-term ability for those units to be affordable.
So I see Mr. Maneri is here now. Can I just turn and can we ask now?
Councillor, Mr. Maneri is available to answer your questions. One of the things the CIO is trying to convey is that this isn't your last look at this, and there will be opportunities down the road to pursue the finer details that you're asking about. So, Mr. Maneri?
Mr. Mayor, through you, the CEO has answered practically 95% of what I would have said. The 100 units is a minimum. That's a minimum number that the Oakville MDC has targeted for this site, and the town has reflected that in the staff report. As far as ownership is concerned, we're hoping that we will see a good mix of fee simple ownership, rentals, any other kind of relationships that we can identify. It's all about the negotiation process as we get to the development stage, but I can assure you that affordable housing at a minimum of 100 units is going to be front and center, and if it can be more than 100 units, it will be.
So thank you for that. It's just the language doesn't say minimum of 100. Just to point that out. And then my other part of my question was just how did the number 100 even get selected as that objective?
My understanding and recollection is that based on the 2018 master plan, it was equated to around 10% of the number of units that were available. I'm assuming that is the same basis for the number now.
Okay. So thank you for that additional information. It's helpful. To me, I think it's important to say minimum. We know that what's going to get built in a lot of places is not quote unquote really affordable and doesn't meet that affordable definition that the Halton region is always used. And so we only get a few opportunities to do better. And I would hope that be the direction we're giving, is do much better. And Mr. Maneri, thank you very much. I heard that in your tone, because we absolutely need to do better. I guess the only piece that I would ask for just a little bit more clarity on is, so at what point will FSI or height or the number of units be determined?
In the OPA that you're going to do.
And again, at what point will they be that coming back in 2023? Is that coming in 2024?
So the next step, through you, Mayor Burton, the next steps of proceeding forward is once the MDC has this direction from council in terms of the objectives to be achieved, then they'll be looking at finalizing an application for an official plan amendment, a zoning bylaw, and a subdivision, which then they'll submit to the town. It'll go through that process, and you'll see it at that point in time for a public meeting and a final decision. So how the density, I'll say, is treated, whether it's an FSI or a height, will all be part of your deliberations in terms of that application that comes in.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Haslett-Thiel, could I ask you to move the item? We're not done with comments, but the reason I'm asking you is you could move it inserting the word minimum in front of 100 units there. Minimum is actually there?
Your worship, it's on page 4 of 6.
My face is
already
red.
Very specifically.
My face is red. All right, well, Councillor Haslett-Thiel, you have your wish.
So I'm just going to, I could only hear a little bit. So where are you saying it says minimum, Councillor Adams?
On page 4 of 6, on page 280 of our agenda, it specifically says staff are recommending that Oakville MDC produce a minimum of 100 units of affordable housing. And so it's in the report.
So under the bullet points that are on page 278 of the agenda item, it also says produce 100 affordable housing units on the property, and that's what I was referring to. So thank you for calling out where it is in the report, because I didn't see it in that section as well. And I would defer to the ward councillors to move this out of respect for them.
Thank you very much. I turn now to Councillor Adams, who has his hand up, and then Councillor Knoll.
I've already clarified the affordable housing issue. I just wanted to raise the Ontario Land Tribunal decision on the Smart Center location next door, and wondered if staff have any comments yet about how that will impact the master planning for the area.
So there's an existing official plan through you, Mr. Mayor, that's in place currently. So it would be up through a process that would be led by MDC to bring forward a plan through a planning process. Certainly the heights and the densities established through the Smart Centers application will be a consideration for council as they decide what's appropriate in the area. But the process would still remain that MDC, if it sees fit to require or need a change to the current official plan designations, then there would be a public process, and council would determine whether that's what's being proposed is appropriate for the land.
All right, thank you. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship, and I am happy to move the item with great thanks to the MDC for moving this forward and staff for finally getting us to this point. It's been a long time in coming to actually get some serious action on the public works site. We're quite, those of us who represent Ward 5, and I think our friends in Ward 6 are probably equally excited to see some actual activity happening on that site. I do want to provide assurance to Councillor Hazza-Thiel that and Mr. Maneri, who's just, oh, he's over there. Mr. Maneri, when we were discussing it with him recently, we were very clear on our interest in seeing unique and maybe even alternative ways of achieving affordable housing on the site. In fact, I gave Mr. Maneri a contact in Ottawa that when I was president of the Housing Corporation, we went to visit how the public sector as well as the private sector can work together to develop unique affordable housing alternatives. I'm not sure if he's had a chance to talk to Axiom yet, but there's certainly a lot of interest on the part of the ward councillors to see that happen too, and we've made that very clear through our conversations with the MDC. Thank you.
All right, I sensed that I could put the vote. Is there any objection to Councillor Knoll's motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. It carries unanimously. That brings us to an MDC-related item, 9.6, the Oakville Municipal Development Corporation, AGM, appointment of auditors, directors, and approval of financial statements. There is a confidential memo related to this item, and a part of 10.1 was related to this item, which we already adopted. Staff are available for questions, and let me check and see if anybody needs a presentation or questions. Councillor Hazza-Thiel.
I just would like to ask a little bit of clarification on the property we call the seniors housing and then old OT. So this is inferring that we're going to go back to separating those two properties in terms of looking for opportunity. Haven't we done that already?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, through you, actually, you've tried both. You've tried together, you've tried apart. We're looking at options. Those two could be the very same options that come forward. But we need to obviously try to make it as attractive as possible, which may include things like making the footprint of the seniors facility much larger than we might have originally envisioned so that there could be more units constructed to increase profitability, and perhaps offering some incentives through the MDC, not the town, to repurpose the school building that perhaps aren't traditionally thought of at the municipal level, but are permissible at the Oakville MDC level.
Thank you for just clarifying.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, would you like to move the item? Thank you very much. Is there any objection to Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel's motion? There being none, Madam Clerk, that carries unanimously as well. Thank you, everybody. 9.7 calls our attention. This is the Halton Digital Access Strategy. Staff are available for questions. It is a thorough and detailed report, and I believe we've all been involved in this as we've gone through a long procedure to get here. I think we all understand what this is for. If there are any questions, I would ask you to ask them now. If they're not, I'd look for a motion. Councillor Lischina, thank you. Any objection to Councillor Lischina's motion? Yes, so Councillor Lischina, you're moving 9.7 and that the confidential appendix be attached as on the confidential agenda be received. Right. And there we go. All, any against? None against, carried. Thank you, everybody. Now we have the procedure bylaw. And the motion was moved by Councillor Lischina and seconded by Councillor Knoll at the council meeting where we needed seconds. And it is my understanding that there's some interest on council that this, I'm going to call it Budget Council, have a chair elected annually rather than being chaired automatically by the mayor. And I would like to assist everybody in that regard by saying that I'm fine with that. And if that is council's pleasure, the clerk will bring back the bylaw appropriately worded. Are there any questions or discussion? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. I actually have a number of questions to a lot of this here, and I guess I can just start going through piece by piece, but I just found a lot of this was sort of placed with council, and a lot of it has to do with council and council's meeting agenda and how council functions. And I have to be honest, I was a little surprised that I was never asked about, you know, how would you prefer to do these types of things rather than the report coming and just saying this is what we think you should do. So I have a problem on page 440 with the addition of the clause C to require cameras to be turned on during all meetings nonstop. Again, that's not what we do with the region, and which is fine. Many of us at home don't have private offices, and we have people walking through. We go to the washroom, we get up. I'm just wondering what, you know, do we have to watch people walking back and forth through our cameras per se? I would like a little clarification on what the nuance is with that one, and what the desire is, and why are we not like the region on that one, or what are other municipalities doing with regards to that at whole times?
Yes. Councillor, our clerk is going to present a little bit of a show and tell, and she will take your questions. I mean, she'll answer your question. I would just stress that this is our opportunity to tell her that we like or don't like a feature, as you just did, I thought very convincingly. And I don't think there's no need to take offense at an opportunity to give opinion. So if I give our attention to Vicki Titanic, our town clerk, she will walk us through what she's proposed.
So thank you very much, Mayor Burton. So I just wanted to give you a very brief overview of what's before you, just so you get the background and we can walk through it. So let me just see if I can, how do I go forward? Okay, yep. Okay, So the procedure bylaw is a requirement of the Municipal Act and is a set of rules and guides for our processes for council and all of our committees. It gives us the rules for how meetings are conducted, how decisions are made and recorded, and how participants can be involved in meetings, scheduling, and all of our notice requirements. It supports the governance process so that the public, council member, and staff understand how decisions are made and what to expect at meetings. So there are elements of the procedure bylaw that are legislatively required and some that are based on best or common practices. Should we run into any procedural matter that's not covered by our bylaw, the Roberts Rules of Order would be our next reference point. The amendments that we brought forward tonight, or the suggested amendments, have been as a result of our collective notes that we make over time as we run into some gray areas that come up now and again, and little things that we notice that could be worded better. We've also consulted other procedure bylaws, and we've also consulted with the mayor. So moving forward, the report before you consists of 3 appendices. The first appendix is a table of the proposed changes, which we thought might help you just to see the comparison between what the current bylaw says and what we're proposing and why we are suggesting that change. Appendix B contains the current bylaw, and Appendix C is the draft of the new bylaw with the changes that we've suggested, but it's certainly not final, and we'll need to make changes to it depending on what directions you give to us tonight. For example, we have options for the budget committee or budget council. That all needs to be ironed out tonight. But I wanted to highlight some of the main changes that we put forward in the report. So just as the mayor mentioned earlier, that was the first recommendation that's in your report, and it deals with the deferred motion that came out of the April council meeting that we'll need to deal with first tonight. Once council deals with this deferred motion regarding the size and composition of the budget committee, we can take that forward to include in the next version of the bylaw. So we've included other options that would achieve that same thing. There's a budget committee membership that would include all members of council. We could keep it as a standing committee. We could also keep it, suggest that it be a committee of the whole that deals with budget matters. And also there's another option in the report that includes a motion that had been brought up at the April meeting just to change the membership from 5 to 8 members. So that's also something to consider, but you still have to consider the deferred motion first regarding budget committee size and composition as a membership of all council members. So that option needs to be considered first. We have, that's just the second recommendation, so that I wanted you to understand that we just want you to see that we've got suggestions in front of you, make sure that we're on the right track, but we're certainly open to taking whatever other changes you'd like to see in the bylaw. And that's what I've been just speaking to about the budget options. So you have budget council, committee of the whole, a budget committee, or you can stay with status quo. We've added a workshop council. So this is just sort of mimicking what you have at the region right now. It's an informal type of council meeting that would better facilitate workshops. It gives a little bit more flexibility in terms of where you can have your workshops, quorum rules, and a little bit of rules about who can delegate at a workshop. We've also added in the electronic participation section. It's not really anything new, it's just a cleanup of the old bylaw, because when COVID hit, we had to make a couple of amendments to our bylaw on the fly, sort of, almost. So this is just a reorg of some of the sections that we had added over the last couple of years. The point that Councillor O'Meara made earlier is when we lose sight of you on the camera, we don't know if you're still in the meeting. So if you picture us here in the council chamber, we can see you, and we can see when you get up and leave the room or you get up and leave the meeting, because part of the rules in the procedure bylaws that we record your attendance. And when it's an electronic meeting, we can't see you when you disappear. And sometimes I've had to, send an email to say, are you still there? Are you still in attendance? So it's just us trying to keep track of whether you're there or not. And also just to be accountable to to the public, so that your face is showing that you are in attendance. And that's why we put it in there. So this is just a really high level highlight of our key areas, but most of the other changes that we put in there are somewhat minor in nature, we think. So we've included other things that you might want to think about to give us direction on, such as whether you want us to start recording your closed sessions, or whether we want all delegations to pre-register and not be able to register here live in the chamber, or looking at changing the timing for delegations. Do you still want them to speak for 10 minutes, or do you want them to be reduced? Those are the kind of things that if you want to talk about, we're open for suggestion. I hope that helps.
Councillor O'Meara?
Oh, thank you, Worship. It does help, Ms. Titanic, and thank you very much for that. I just think a lot of the councillors here went through a time where all of a sudden our IT expenses policy changed and we didn't know what happened, and we looked back and said, crap, we didn't understand the nuance of some of the changes in the bylaws. So, so I'll just throw up some of my comments here, and I guess we'll sort of open straw poll and councillors can jump in. But again, I'm happy to have some sort of a difference. Any councillor from here can get up and leave this chamber for 15, 20 minutes, do whatever they need to do outside of this chamber. And I think that luxury should be afforded if you're at home on camera. There might be issues that come up, somebody banging at the door, something going on that needs to be addressed. So I certainly wouldn't want it to be that we've left the meeting if we need to leave for a minute. So maybe we can work on some wording around there, and just to give a little bit of leeway. On page 442, sections 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.7, I just feel as a councillor, we keep getting jammed with more and more information later and later and closer to a decision-making meeting. And I don't think it helps us make good decisions. I would rather the cutoff be earlier, so we're all very clear on the information we have before us, and we limit as much as possible last minute information coming in that we may need to seek advice on, we may need more information on, and we don't have time to activate that. So I'm cautious about those items in that section that's been amended. 5.4, and again, I'm saying this as a region and town councillor, but I'm afraid by a simple clause in here, we've doubled our town councillors' commitments to P&D. I personally would rather a 4 o'clock on if we need a little extra time. At least it's one day and we can get through what we need to get through, rather than having to designate 2 complete evenings, if that's what's going on. But I'm cautious. I'm cautious of the work slip that we're asking, in particular, our town colleagues to do, when that's not a part of what their duties were assigned at that point. In sections 14.4 on motions, this is just reading to me with some recency bias here about what it is when we receive a motion to receive. If we're going to say that it's not an endorsement of the matter, I would certainly like language in that to the effect that we expect our motions to receive to be fact-based and non-opinionated. I would expect some language to make sure that what we receive as information to receive is non-biased and non-opinionated and completely fact-based. So I'd like some language around that one to be incorporated into that one as well. And with that, Your Worship, those are my comments on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I turn to the lineup, just to supplement your concern about the camera question, Madam Clerk, is it the case that the province's legislation permits participation by telephone?
It does, yes.
I wonder if, given that, a requirement about a camera might have some difficulty making sense.
This is true. We can work on the wording there.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you very much, through you, Mayor Burton. I really appreciate what you said regarding about you don't need to be the chair. Actually, that's basically what I heard. I like that because we need succession planning for councillors, new councillors especially. And I really think that is important. We don't have too many opportunities for new councillors to be chairs anymore. And I think it kind of just sharpens new councillors up also as to what the rules and regulations are. So I'm really pleased to see what you're suggesting there, and I fully support you. As far as delegations, 10 minutes, I really believe is important. What I heard just a week ago at Midtown from the delegations was absolutely amazing. The knowledge we have in Oakville from our residents, I think 10 minutes is perfect. I do believe they don't need pre-registration. If they hear new information they weren't aware of, let them speak. We're all here to hear what the residents want to express to us, and I think that's important. So I totally agree with what I just heard from Councillor O'Meara regarding fact-based, no opinion. So there's not any negative comments that I heard in a recent 4.1 meeting where it was 3 negative comments about council if you do not agree with this. I didn't appreciate that, and I think that should never happen again. And those are my comments on going forward with this, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McNeese, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Lischina.
Through your worship, I'll just build on a few previous things that were mentioned. Regarding the procedural bylaws, I know they're different in each municipality, and I think it would be beneficial, especially for new councillors, for a training or orientation workshop. I don't know if it means it needs to be a council workshop, but maybe even some existing councillors would like a refresher, seeing they're all different and unique, and I know other municipalities offer that as part of an orientation for new councillors, so I'd put that comment in. Secondly, on, so Councillor O'Meara pointed out section 5.4, planning and development, that instead of every 4 weeks, it is suggesting every 2 weeks is my understanding there. Additionally, I'm in favor with the amendment to the budget committee. And, you know, I know in our last meeting, special meeting of P&D, that we also have a Midtown committee that will be starting. So especially on the town councillor side, that's, you know, our commitment sort of doubled there, and I'll certainly try my best to do it. But I might put forward a suggestion here that the Midtown committee, to me, it seems to be a better fit as a standing committee, especially for the second option, which would allow each ward to decide which councillor to appoint. So I know we suggested committee of the whole at the last meeting. However, kind of looking at this structure here, I'm of the opinion that it might be best fit in that second option of the standing committee structure. So those are my comments for now, but I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Council didn't suggest it resolved that the committee would be as it resolved in the written, you know, in the motion at the time. But thank you for the remarks on the budget committee. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, under 5.4, the planning and development, was it to double the number of meetings or would it be as required?
I believe the idea was that we added 2 planning and development meetings on, and the second one was always there just in case we needed it. It was not a definite meeting. It was a placeholder basically for your calendars.
All right, and under the amendments that may be considered, this has not been included as further discussions regarding legal current concerns is required. Any idea when that would come back, or is that something that that will be with our legal staff? Or is that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
The bottom of 443 in terms of recording of closed sessions. Is that our decision to make, or is that following what the province would like us to do?
No, we can do it. In fact, it's a recommendation that the Ombudsman has made to some municipalities. Having consulted with legal, though, we do have a question of whether the Ombudsman, yes, it makes it a lot easier for them to do a closed meeting investigation if it's recorded. So of course they'd want to see our recordings, but it also puts a little bit of risk in creating a record that is sensitive and another record that we need to protect and make sure that the proper everything is in place, that we don't release the wrong information to the wrong person.
All right, I appreciate the input and agree with the input from Councillors O'Meara, McNeice, and Elder. In terms of timing of delegations, we don't keep track of how long people speak, I take it. It's...
No. Oh, you mean that's what the clock is?
Yes.
We clock them, yeah. Yeah.
No, but do we record, not record, but do we keep track of how long they speak for? Like, do we have any idea if the average is 6 minutes or 8 minutes? Or...
No.
All right, and for clarity, could you tell us what the next steps are? Like, is this our last opportunity to give you input on this, or is it something that you'd welcome?
No, what we were hoping was that any suggestions that you bring forward tonight, this is your opportunity. We were hoping to bring a more final version of the bylaw after your suggestions this evening to the June meeting. But if it's still not what you want, we're not going to ask you to pass a bylaw unless you're comfortable with it. So, you know, we'll do the next go around, and if we don't make it, we'll just keep going until you're satisfied with it.
We'll have to double those meetings as well. And I agree with the bandwidth. You know, how many times have we as individuals or people phoning in simply don't have the bandwidth? You know, they're away, and I would much rather be able to listen to somebody. I don't need to see them, rather than have them not be able to attend the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was also under the impression that the second P&D meeting was a placeholder and that not potentially every month. But as a town councillor, I think it is important to have the meetings after regular business hours, as well as for any delegations who are out of town coming back and wanting to participate. I certainly want to participate, and I know I wouldn't be able to do that during the day. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Burton. Thank you very much for the additional information. To add to some of the comments made by my fellow councillors, which I support Councillor Algers and Councillor Giddings and Councillor Mira and Councillor McNeice's additions. So I'm wondering where we get to that question that Councillor Dudek asked about committees and the rotation of committees, and if there's best practice out outside of what we have done to consider. If you could just bring that back with your recommendation, next recommendations.
Yes, through you, Mayor Burton. The idea was that we were going to be bringing back the procedure on appointing members to committees at the next council meeting. In our policy report, we're reviewing that internally, and it should be on the next agenda. We thought it would be a good accompanying report if it was on the same agenda with the procedure bylaw, just in case any of the changes or suggestions that are made tonight might affect the way we write that procedure, and making sure that we won't have to revise that if more changes are made.
So I look forward to seeing that. Thank you for that. I have some just additional comments that haven't been made yet. One of the, so on the Planning and Development Council meetings, there are times where our meetings fall on would normally fall on a statutory holiday. And then we are immediately into a meeting the Tuesday when we come back from what is supposed to be considered a long weekend, which it isn't when you have a planning and development meeting on the Tuesday night. So I'm wondering if there could be some consideration about how we stagger that to address statutory meetings. I've also had that raised by the public to me that it's hard for them, you know, they're going to have to spend time to get prepared to come and comment, and they're going to have to do so over the weekend. So if you could just consider that in, is there a workaround for that? I have heard several individuals talk about a rotating chair on a rotating basis, so I assume that'll be something that's raised as part of the policy. I'm wondering around standing committees and special committees. So special committees are typically considered standing committees, and I'm wondering if there could be language that protects them no matter what the size of their membership is, that they are under the standing committee rules, and if you could share any best practices when you come back on that. And my last comments are, I think 10 minutes is important. I became aware of the 5-minute rule when I moved to the regional side, and from some folks commenting about the 10 minutes. We always try to encourage people to give us as much information as we need to make a good decision, and so I continue to support 10 minutes. I continue to support the delegations be encouraged but not required to register on planning and development meetings. I think that it just speaks to who we are as a town, that we welcome input, and I've always appreciated Mayor Burton's approach to canvassing the room. It embodies the spirit, I think, of what we want to stand for. And with that, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams?
Thanks very much. I agree with many of the comments about for example, the 5 versus 10 minute. I'm perfectly good with the 10 minute. I think it's reasonable the vast majority of the time. And the only thing I was going to say with respect to the budget committee chair, just the discrepancy with the region where the regional chair runs that committee as well. And so there's you know, number of options there, and I think I certainly would be perfectly okay having the mayor run the budget committee in whatever format it might be.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, let's take this in bites. It's moved and before us that the budget committee size and composition be amended to reflect a membership of all council members. And based on the discussion, I would suggest that we insert as a budget standing committee with a chair selected by the members each year. And that revisions to the procedure bylaw affecting this change be brought forward and presented at a council meeting to come. I don't think we want to get too specific because we just, all right. So can I put the vote on that? Is there any objection? There being no objection, we made a unanimous decision on that. Thank you very much. Now we have to do two more bits. The clerk had suggested that the next bit be the council endorse in principle the approach outlined and the suggested changes with respect to the draft procedure bylaw attached to, et cetera. And I would suggest that instead we want to say that the clerk consider the comments of council in finalizing a draft procedure bylaw for consideration by council, which is borrowing the terminology from how we do planning. Any objection to, I need a mover for that though, before I, Councillor Chisholm, any objection to Councillor Chisholm's motion? There being none, that carries. And the clerk had suggested a final bit that staff report back with a finalized draft version, I'm inserting the word draft version of the procedure bylaw in June 2023. Madam Clerk, are you still comfortable with that time frame?
We were going to try and keep that.
All right. I'll ask who wants to move that. I'll go to this side of the table, give you guys a chance. Councillor Nanda. Any objection to Councillor Nanda's motion? Councillor Chisholm.
Your Worship, so there's no legal binding, anything that we have to worry about on a timing issue. So if you're not ready to be in June, if we said it's going to be late June, early July, there's no issue with that, with timing?
We're going to make sure that our notice is given to give 14 days notice, I believe. So as long as we get a notice out 14 days before the June meeting, if it doesn't get passed, we've still given notice and it'll just continue.
Thank you.
If I could just clarify one thing, when you said that the budget committee would be a standing committee, it would be a standing committee of all members of council?
That's what I read,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
I have the text here. If after the meeting, I'll give it to you. I know you're not at your station, so. All right. There being no objection to Councillor Nanda's motion, I declare it carried. Thank you, everybody. We dealt with 10.1 and 10.2, and we have no advisory committee minutes. And so, good news. It would be in order for a motion to rise and report. Councillor Longo gets on the minutes. Any objection? There being no objection, Councillor Longo's motion to rise and report carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole met and made recommendations on consent items 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, and 7.7. Discussion items 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 9.6, 9.7, and 9.8, and the confidential discussion items 10.1 and 10.2, as noted by the clerk. It would now be great to have a mover and seconder to adopt the report. Councillor Shi, thank you for moving that. Councillor Giddings, thank you for seconding it. Is there any objection to the report? Madam Clerk, there being none, the report is adopted. I have there is some new business, and I have something. So I want to take this opportunity to extend an invitation to the entire community to join us for two events that will be held in the month of June. As part of our commitment to inclusivity and celebration of diverse cultures, these events hold great importance in fostering unity and understanding among our residents. The first event, in honor of Black Music Month, will take place on June 1st from 10:30 to 11 a.m. at Town Hall. We will gather to appreciate and acknowledge the profound impact that Black musicians and artists have had on our cultural landscape. I encourage everyone to join us in this celebration of Black culture and its influence on the world of music. The second event, on June 5th, from 9 to 9:30 a.m. at Town Hall, will be the Pride Month flag-raising ceremony. This event holds great significance as we come together to show our support for the LGBTQ+ community. And given the unanimous council support for the Pride Crosswalk, I imagine we'll see everyone there. Councillor O'Meara and then Councillor Shi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to offer my condolences and hopefully all of Council's condolences on the passing of Ken Pollock. And Ken was one of the original Bronte boys, an original firefighter in the village of Bronte, and spent many an afternoon on a bench down at Fisherman's Pier. There is a Bronte's Fisherman's Memorial that he helped spearhead and get placed down there, and right across from it is a bench that bears his name on it to this day. It was a couple of weeks ago that we lost Ken, and he leaves behind 6 children, 10 grandchildren, and 8 great grandchildren. But they all are all still in and about the Bronte area, and he will long be missed sitting down on the pier. And his knowledge of Bronte was extensive, and the book he wrote on it was quite a read as well. So on behalf of myself and council, to the Pollock family, our condolences.
Thank you very much, Councilor O'Meara, for doing that on our behalf. Councilor Shi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Councilor Nander and I would like to express our gratitude to our dedicated staff and the Mayor's office to their invaluable support during the 2 significant Asia Heritage Month events. The first event, the May 1st kickoff and flag raising, was followed by memorable May 16th celebration night. We were thrilled to see a remarkable turnout, over 500 residents who attend both occasions. We extend our heartfelt thanks to everyone involved in making this event a resounding success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Shi. Councilor Knoll, your hand disappeared? All right, very well. The next item of new business is the notice of motion to be considered at the next council meeting to be held on June 19th. And that is a notice of motion offered by Councilors Haslett-Deal and Duddick. And Councilors, it occurs to me to ask if you would like to waive the procedure and consider it tonight. Then Councilor Duddick, would you like to move that we waive the procedure to take the matter up tonight? And Councilor Haslett-Deal, would you like to second it? Is there any objection to that motion? It carries unanimously. I reversed your positions because I noticed that you were the other order on the main motion, and I just thought we'd go for equality or something. It's a very long motion. Councilors, do you want to take turns reading it? What do you want to do about the length of this thing? It's it's a pretty long motion. It's been in the media a lot. Do you want to give a summary of it?
We don't need to read it all in, though I would encourage the public that's watching and others that if you haven't read it, it's an important motion. It really speaks to missing a piece of enforcement that brings civility and a sense of safeness for those that are in public office. While we have municipal codes of conduct, there have been several incidents outside of our chambers and other municipalities where disrespectful behavior and workplace harassment has occurred, and yet the individuals were not able to be held to account. And so this is simply an accountability motion to encourage and support the Ontario Big City Mayor's motion, as well as the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, that the Ontario government support MPP Stephen Blah's introduction of a Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act, and to do what it takes to create the right environment so we can encourage and bring more people into public service and make them feel that they will not face harassment or disrespectful behavior.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Duddick?
Couldn't add anything more. Beautifully said.
Thank you, Councilor. I will add that at the Ontario Big City Mayor's Caucus, this substantially the same motion carried unanimously, and it arose from some really egregious getting away with it that went on in cities I'm tempted to name, but maybe I'll hold back because they were all in the media. And anyway, it's so ugly. Maybe I shouldn't extend the remarks any further than to say the big city mayors are solidly on this. It's amazing what councilors can get away with and got away with in some pretty famous cities. So luckily, I don't think in our history we've ever had that here, and I don't think we ever will. But I'll call the vote, and I would suggest that you might like a recorded vote. So I will ask if there's any objection, and I see none, and I'll ask the clerk to record everybody's name as voting in support of it, unless there's an objection to that approach. There being no objection, it's so ordered by council. Thank you, everybody. Now, skipping ahead, we have a request for report by Councillor Adams and Councillor Nanda that the staff report in the fall of 2023 on lessons learned from the experiences of Brampton, Caledon, and any other municipality that has adopted a firework use and or sale prohibition. In addition, and in consultation with the legal department, provide options to reduce the use of personal fireworks in the community. And they're not really debatable. I'll just put the vote. Does anyone object to the report request? It's carried. I would like to call out Councillor O'Meara for a very, very smart message he wrote to some constituents, I think only today, on this matter. And Councillor O'Meara, I'm calling attention to your remarks because you might like an opportunity to reprise them here. The huge difficulty he put his finger on, and I don't want to put my finger where his was. So I'm offering you the chance, sir, if you want to speak to that.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you to my council colleagues for bringing the report forward. As some of you may know, the past weekend was a bit of a mess in the Brawny area, where the police had to shut down Lakeshore Road, and there were multiple arrests and these sorts of things. And I mean, I think the idea is just, banning fireworks in our town alone will not stop this. Police response are incredible always, and will continue to be. But I have tried to encourage parents and people involved to know where your kids are and know what your children are doing and know where you're bringing them and dropping them off and know who they're with and what they're up to. Because at the end of the day, and your worship has often said that, we get the community that we with the efforts that we put into it. And if this type of antisocial behavior is not an easy solve, but it's one that all of us need to work towards. And I would certainly hope that all the residents know that council is working towards doing whatever we can do, but knowing that none of us want to have roaming mobs of law enforcement on every street corner all night long in case there is antisocial behavior. But we're working towards that, and we're all partners in this community, and I would certainly hope that parents and everybody are part of that solution as well. So thank you for the opportunity, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. I thought that was a very well done observation about the Brawny events, let's call it. Councillor Haslett-Thiel?
Mayor Burton, I would like to ask a question that's new business to the CAO, if I may.
Yes.
So I have had individuals come to me in the last 5 or 6 days, anxious to know when the Special Committee on Midtown will convene its first meeting. And in part, I think it comes from the spirit of they felt, and we're incredibly appreciative of Council's unanimous support of the Special Committee. And while they read the amendment, there's a sense of, there's momentum here. And people want to understand how we are going to move this forward. And I'm wondering if it is, if there is an option to get a date in this calendar before, sometime in June, to at least move this, the first committee meeting forward.
Through you, Mayor Burton. At this point in time, we are looking at putting a report together for the June 26th meeting of, I think it's Planning and Development Council, setting out how we would proceed with the timing, the topics to be discussed, which many of them are outlined in the motion that was approved by Council, and how we'd move forward. I would agree with you, there is some momentum and really excitement in terms of moving forward on Midtown, and we don't want to lose that. But I think the first step is to put together that overall program of how we'll roll it out. with the dates associated with it for the special council meetings. So I wouldn't think that on that basis, we'd have a special council meeting in June, but we'll certainly have a program that will roll out how we're going to, and the topics to be considered, and the order of those and the dates of those in a report on June 26th.
Thank you for that.
All right. It would now be in order for a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor McNeice and Councillor Longo, thank you. Is there any objection? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the bylaws have been considered, read, and passed as listed in the agenda 18.1 through 4. And with that, that ends the work of this meeting. And I want to thank everybody for everything you put into it. It's been great working with you, and the meeting is done.